what it is, and if people are disappointed, I'll give them their money back. I was always told to start a presentation with a joke, so that's it. Okay. So there have been paths on the Welsh coast for a long time, since the dawn of time, for shepherds and fishermen and things like that. But we're wondering where the Welsh coast path started, and a lot of people think that the seed that was sown that resulted in the Wales coast path was the creation in 1952 of the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. And the government set aside and acquired easements and rights of way over the land around pretty much the whole of the coast of Pembrokeshire. It's the smallest UK national park, but it's also the only coastal one. And as soon as they'd done that, of course, a bunch of hikers looked at it, probably some ancestors of our trails chair, and said, "We've got to put a trail through that." So they did. And it took them 18 years. But in 1970, the Pembrokeshire Coast Path was opened. It's 186 miles from a place called St Dogmaels up in the north, up here, which is next to Chester, right on the English border, and goes down to a place called Amrod in the south, and there, which again, no, sorry, I'm getting confused with the whole Wales coast. The Pembrokeshire Coast Path goes from St Dogmaels to Amrod in the south. It's not the English border. So, the Wales Coast Path, when it also follows that, and also the International Appalachian Trail follows that path as well. So the Pembrokeshire Coast Path proved to be a big boost to the economy, tourism and everything. So everybody wanted to get in on the act. And so there was the North Wales Coast Path opened in 1997, 60 miles. The Anglesey Coast Path that goes around an island called Anglesey just off the Welsh coast, part of Wales, 120 miles opened in 2006. And at that opening, the First Minister of Wales said, "We're going to build a path around the whole of the coast of Wales." So that was when they started to do that. Cardigan Coast Path opened in 2008. It was 72 miles. By the time they put these things together, in fact, I should explain that this is a very timely presentation. As some of you may know, last month, the 5th of May to be precise, was the 10th anniversary of the opening of the Wales Coast Path. So they put all this stuff together and came up with this Wales Coast Path. It's 870 miles long. And it's the only country where you can walk the entire coastline. That's according to the Welsh Tourist Board. It's actually mostly over private land compared with the AT, which is all publicly owned. It's less than 5% public land. It's all done by easements and rights of way, existing rights of way, and ones. 80% of this is on paths, 20% on roads, mainly quiet country lanes. The 20% that's on roads is sometimes due to topographic and geographical issues. You can't physically get it right next to the coast. And sometimes because landowners have not yet given permission for the path to cross their land. There's a couple of places you'll see later where the Ministry of Defence has a big artillery range on one part of the coast. Surprisingly enough, they don't let people wander through there unannounced. And you can link with the Office Dyke Path. I think maybe some people have done that. Which is about 177 miles, runs along basically the border between Wales and England. And again, according to the Welsh Tourist Board, you can walk around the whole country. It's the only country you can walk all the way around. So my path, my exposure to all this started when I was a little kid in the 60s. Before that, we had a map here. So this is a map of the whole of the Welsh Coast Path. You can see there's London there, think most of you are kind of familiar with this chunk of Middle England. There's Birmingham there, where I grew up, Manchester and Liverpool here, Bristol, Cardiff, Swansea. So it runs from Chepstow in the south, it's Chepstow, right on the English border there, up to near Chester in the north. In both cases, it joins the English coast path, which is more somebody's dream at the moment, because it's, I don't know whether that's ever happened. So as I said, my association with the Welsh coast path started in the 60s when I was a teenager. Younger than that, my parents used to take me to this Welsh seaside town called Llandudno. And then you have Llandudno there at the front. It's a quintessential British seaside town. It has a beach, a promenade, backed by all the Victorian hotels and guest houses. It has a pier, a lifeboat station, and a Punch and Judy show. So I could go into that, but it's outside the scope of this presentation. And my dad used to take me walking not only on the front there, which is now part of the Welsh coast path, but he also used to take me walking on the cliffs behind and at the side of Llandudno as well. And I didn't know it at the time, but those cliff paths are now part of the Welsh coast path. So fast forward to 2014, and I decided I wanted to do the Pembrokeshire coast path. So I planned it, started going, and my first trip, I got a train. It's a little difficult to see here. I got a train to this little town called Tenby here. And from there, I got a bus to Amroth, which is the start of the Pembrokeshire part of the Welsh coast path. That's on the border of the county. Walked back to Tenby and continued from there. So I had a guest house in Tenby, I think Faulty Towers. And I tell you, the guest house I was in, the reception and the dining room looked exactly like that. But luckily, the proprietor was much unpleased. So I walked out, I got a bus out to Amroth and then walked back to Tenby. I don't think the back there is not terribly spectacular or exciting. It's a nice walk, so I didn't take many photographs. This is Tenby Harbour. And this is Tenby Harbour from the other side. This is where I walked from. Amroth was over here, so I walked along this part of the coast. You can see it's pretty low.
So are there markers to delineate the path, or do you just walk along the coast?
Yes, there are markers all the way. We'll see some of those. It's an extremely well-marked path. So I then continued from Tenby. This is a picture of Tenby Beach. You can see that everybody's dressed for the British summer. Not a bikini in sight. And there's quite an interesting island with a fortress on the back there. There's a lot of fortifications on the whole path. And you have an ice cream van and a fish and chip shop van out there as well. So now we start on the actual trail itself coming out of Tenby, and we're immediately getting some spectacular views on the coast. You see somebody there out in front of me. Another picture of the trail. And as you come up from Tenby, the first thing you hit, spend a lot of time going up and down in the Welsh coast path, and I'll talk some more about that later. The first place you reach is called the Beach, and you see some people there with surfboards. And I didn't know this, but I found out when putting the presentation together that Norbier is a surfing destination in the UK. It has its page on the UK surfing website. I was surprised. It says, good consistent surf, but not in summer, only in winter. And I was there in summer, although there's still people trying to surf. Says the beach break offers both left and right hand waves. I have no idea what that means, but apparently it's good. Maybe Greg could tell us.
And point break too, point break as well. So
Yeah.
the way to break off the point, you can usually go one way by the time you're moving.
So just one of the many things you can do along the Welsh coast path is go surfing. That's another picture of the beach from the back of the beach itself. And if you look the other way, you see back there, that is an 11th century Norman castle, an Oldie castle. Something else you don't get on the AT. I did not go into it, you can, because it's actually slightly off the path. It's not technically on the path. And also I was pushed for time, so I didn't go into it. More about castles later. So moving on, we've got some quite interesting geological formations here. Obviously the coast swept up quite a bit at some point before it eroded. And the sea has eroded a lot of sea arches. There's a number of those scattered around the coast. Back you can see, it's quite focused. We'll get focused a little bit on it.
So what time of year was this?
I've been all past the summer, but I prefer to go in June or July because British school kids, I think that's a bit better there. British school kids get out the middle of July, and it's a lot easier to book accommodations before they're on holiday. So this is probably June or July, I forget exactly when.
The temperatures were in the 50s or
Temperatures are usually in the mid-60s.
60s?
Yeah. And you can see a tanker there in the background. We're going around and heading to what we call Milford Haven. So further along, there's a National Trust property called Stackpole, right on the path. The back door is right on the path. So I took some time to go and wander around there. There are famous blue ponds and a stately home. The National Trust is the biggest European conservation charity. They conserve mainly old houses and buildings, but also wild places as well. And the most important thing about it is they usually have the best tea room in the vicinity. So I can have tea there. So moving along, I overnighted in a little village called St. Govans. This is a pub, right room overnight. Talk briefly about accommodations. There's, can't really backpack, there's no primitive camping in Wales, it's not allowed. You can stealth camp, but it's frowned on. And if the locals notice the police are going to move you on. There are regular campsites, but they're fairly widely spaced out. So what I was doing most of the time was I was staying in bed and breakfasts, guest houses and pubs. And this is one of the pubs. They're reasonably inexpensive, they're very easy to book. This is the St. Govans Inn. So it's continuing around the headland, and this is the section where the military has cordoned off an area. They've had an artillery range there for a long time. And this is one of the few parts of the coast that you can't actually walk on. You can see it on the map, there's a big chunk taken out. Because nobody's allowed there, there's a lot of wildflowers. So coming round off the headland, this is one of the lower lying parts. That's some tidal mudflats there. Got a picture of them. And then you come up into Milford Haven itself, and you'll see on the far right there is part of the oil terminal. It's a big deep water harbour. It's the biggest oil terminal and refinery, or one of the biggest in the UK. But from the path, it's pretty well hidden most of the time. Move on, you can see some part of it from over there. There's a tanker there, and a yacht in the foreground. You can get some idea of the scale of that. I decided to do the Pembrokeshire Coast path from south to north because that gets increasingly better and more spectacular scenery, and also it gets more increasingly difficult as you go north. So I thought I'd start with the easy and not as exciting stuff. That's old ruined houses, so all of those. And then I was coming down into Pembroke, and right on the path, you got Pembroke Castle. I arrived too late in the day to go in and go and look around, so I had to be constantly taking pictures from the outside. But so the typical, what you think the castle ought to look like. There's a moat, a drawbridge. Looks a fantastic castle. I stayed in Pembroke for the night and then continued walking down. This is one of the 3 industrial bits. Walked down to the top of Milford Haven, across the bridge, and walked back up into Milford Haven itself. And I put this in because that says beware of the bees, and you can see a beehive in the back. I've seen lots of signs in the UK, beware of the dog, beware of the bull. That was the only time I'd ever seen one that said beware of the bees. So I was curious enough to put it in there. Now this is Milford Haven itself. Again, you can see the oil refinery and tankers there. And this is Milford Haven Marina. It's a quite nice place. This is a monument there. It's called the Elements Monument to 4 workers who died in an explosion at the refinery in 2010. So that was the end of my first session, and I took the train back from Milford Haven back to Birmingham. I tended to use trains and buses a lot. Public transport in the UK is pretty good. It's not too expensive, and if you can schedule it with a reasonable amount beforehand and with discounts, and you just need some planning so you get on the right bus and the right train. Taking cars on this is possibly a bit problematic because parking is, it's not very much of it, and it's very expensive. And then if you're walking along the coast, you've got to try and arrange shuttles or buses backwards and forwards. So most of the time I've used public transportation. Recommended to be able to do the same. So on my next sally, I took the train back into Milford Haven and started walking up the coast again. See that here? Milford Haven there. There's Birmingham, so I got the train back from Birmingham to Milford Haven and started walking up the coast up here. So my next destination was Solva. And a few miles out of Milford Haven, we come to this. This is Sandy Haven, called the Sandy Haven Hill. This is the lowest point on the Welsh coast path. It's 1.8 meters above mean low water. That means it's about 2 meters below average water and 4.5 meters below high water. And if you look at this picture here, you see a yacht there and 2 poles. This is at low tide. At high tide, this is the same yacht from a slightly different perspective. And see how far the water is up the poles. So you can cross this an hour and a half before and after low water. Otherwise, you end up with a significant road walk. This is the Solva crossing here. You have to go all the way back here, all the way around here. And it's about 4 miles. And the other interesting thing is there's another crossing here, just a little bit further down, where again, if you don't get across, again, it's an hour and a half before or after high water. So they recommend if you want to do both, you arrive at the first one about 2.5 hours before low water, so you can get across as soon as you can, then move on to the second one and get across that. I didn't actually do that because I got into Milford Haven quite late in the day. Just crossed the first one and then stayed in the bed and breakfast. So you have to look at your timetables. There's also some other places, several other places on the path where the main traffic goes along the beach, for instance, the top of the beach below the cliffs, and you can't do that at high water. Usually it's not as constrained as this. I mean, this you've only got 3 hours to get across there. So you would look at the tide tables. If you were there today, these are the tide tables for today for Norfolk Haven.
Pretty big change on what to do.
That is, I was going to point that out. So you can see the low tide at 1:25 a.m. You could do that, but maybe not. Then the high tide at 7:27, or low tide at 1:49. So that means you could get across pretty much between maybe 12:30 and 3. And as Greg points out, you look at the difference there. There's a 20-foot difference between high and low water here. So you're not going to get across unless you want to swim with the road water. So you have to do a little bit of planning around the tide tables in certain places. This is the second crossing a little bit further down the coast. I got there about half an hour before the water was low enough for me to cross, so I was just waiting around, and eventually it went down off this boardwalk and I was able to walk across.
So were there locals that would give you a boat ride across?
No. I think the road might be difficult because getting on and off at either side would be the problem. The locals feel, hey, if you're here as my water shall speak be fault and you do problem. But this was the bed and breakfast I stayed in between the two. And there was this antique cottage show in there. This is a cottage show. This is where I used to make butter. You fill that with full cream milk and then turn the handle like crazy. And butter and buttermilk comes out the other end. So walking along down this huge road, you see a fortification in the bay there. There's a lot of fortifications both on the land and in the water around the Welsh coast to prevent invasion, mainly from the French, but sometimes from others. And here I'm looking back to Norfolk Haven, just the silhouette of the oil refinery. And now the scenery is beginning to get a little more interesting, I think. And you can see there, and you can see it in the background there. On the right, there's another of these little fortifications over the castle. So as we get a little closer still, lots of these were fortified. Just a nice picture of the beach. You're talking about signage. This is typical signage here on the path. You can see the Welsh Coast Path sign here, and there's a couple of other paths intersect here, so they're there. And also you have these at a lot of places. That's an Ordnance Survey coordinate grid. It has the name of the place and the coordinates on there. So if you have an Ordnance Survey map, you can immediately look on that map and tell you where you are. So it's not impossible to get lost on this map, but it's quite difficult. It's not follow. More nice scenery. You can draw nice scenery. This is a trail going there. This is looking back. That is Stonewall or Stockholm Island there. See, this is looks like a castle, but it's not. This is a stately home, but it was done by somebody who was newly rich in the 1800s, and they just made it look like a castle. This is a fake, but I believe it's a hotel now. And again, some more of the fortifications, Stonewall fortifications. And a lot of the old churches, and I'll say more about those later as well. Very old churches in a lot of these places. And I found this fascinating. I was walking along past that, and somebody's built a house into the side of the hill here. There's a road at the back of there, I guess, that needs to access. I think I told you most of this path is actually on private property through easements. So I guess whoever built this owned that. The front of that is completely glass. Can't see very well from here, but I could see into the guy's living room. And you can see tables and chairs. I guess The bedroom's probably at the back of the previously. I think it's kind of fascinating the way it's built into the side of the. That's maybe 200 yards off the path. It's the random sea step. At the reach, you can see a trail up there on the left.
There's someone on a parachute or something.
Yes, that's right. That's another one of the sports they did here was paragliding. And I came across this, and I wondered what it is. And apparently, this is an air vent for a mine shaft. There's a mine under here. The Welsh are kind of famous for three things: rugby, male voice choirs, and mining. Don't worry, they will mine anything: coal, stone, slate, silver, tin, gold. And they're very good at it. There are mines all over the place. And this is an air shaft for a mine that's under there somewhere. And there's the guy in the parasail again. So then I'm coming into my destination, which was Solva. This is like a terrific deep water harbour here. You can see there's runs up the middle there. And it's been an economic, like, local powerhouse for a long time. There's a Stone Age fort up on the hill, so it was colonised a long time ago. In the 1940s, the 1840s, sorry, you could get passage to America from here on a passenger ship for £4. They said in 1900 there were 30 ships registered out of this harbour. It's beautiful. The other thing they have there is they have wine kilns. They used to burn limestone. If you burn limestone at about 1,000 degrees C, it forms quicklime, which is a vital ingredient for plaster, concrete, and other building things. So they used to quarry lime against the Welsh mining things, quarry lime, burn it in these, and ship it out through the harbour. So this is low tide, but further down, there's still plenty of water to float. Decent ship there. This is the actual quay itself. High water, obviously, will be plenty of. So that was my second foray. For my third foray, I decided to stay at a place called St David's, which is one of the oldest cities in Wales. It's so old nobody remembers it was there. And do day trips around. So I've put in a couple of pictures here of this is the Bishop's Palace in St David's, which was built in 1300, it's now a ruin. And this is the Cathedral in St David's, which was started in 1180. The old, been added history ever since. And not on the path, but I was staying in St David's, so I couldn't remember anymore. So functional now. The cathedral is still in use there, and still have services there. Is. So the way you can get around this peninsula is they have these little shuttle buses running from St David's out to the coast and along parts of the coast where there's a road, which is not a lot of places. You have cute names like the Puffin Express and the Coastal Shuttle. And this is the Strumble Shuttle, and I took this one out to the coast from St David's. And they're on pretty often. There's one caveat: don't try and take the last one leaving from the beach or the village, because the last one is usually full, and you can end up walking on and you get moved on. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen signs like this before. This means don't go too close to the edge or you will fall off and kill yourself. And large parts of the Welsh coast path are falling into the sea all the time. Here's an example of one of them. This is the path here. We're looking at a little more closely. The path went down here and has now been temporarily rerouted up here, but it's still pretty scary to be close to that. I just close my eyes. I don't close my eyes. I focus straight ahead. Take a deep breath and just keep going. So apparently sounds a lot. They say that 4 to 6 places a year the path has to be relocated because it's falling into the sea. And there's a 150-foot drop there. It's not trivial. The other thing you see a lot of is you're walking along the path and there's a drop over there, but there's this hedge. You think, oh, I feel nice and secure here. There's a very nice hedge there. What you don't realize is that there's about 12 inches of flimsy vegetation between you and a 200-foot drop. So, gives you confidence, gives you, if you don't think that it's a bit of an illusion there. This is more my kind of path, where it's wide, it's flat, and it's set well back from the edge of the cliff. So this is there's a lot of wildflowers you see along the path. This is an example. This is a plant called ling, which is in the heather family, same as the Scottish heather. And when you get big clumps of it, it's pretty impressive. Beautiful. Sometimes you see whole hillsides covered with it. It's got this lovely look, and they're all big flowers. There's lots of wild flowers. Through another National Trust place, this is called Wolf Place. It's harbour, low tide. You have to walk back quite a long way from the key is right down there in the centre. You have to walk back upstream for quite a long way to the bridge to cross. And the scenery, I think, is getting more spectacular by the mile. If you look here carefully, you can see 2 buildings here in the distance. What that is this is the St. Justinian's lifeboat station. And I'm past them on the other side. The new one is on the right, the old one is on the left. And lifeboat stations for all the coastal rescue in the UK. I find it interesting that there's a big contrast between the 2 rescue services, fire and coastal rescue, in the US and the UK. In the US, the coastal rescue is done by the Coast Guard, which is a government organisation, professional, paid for by the government. The fire services are all local volunteer things. In the UK, it's the opposite. The fire services are all professional, paid by the government. The lifeboat service, which does all the coastal rescue, is a volunteer organisation. It's probably one of the most professional volunteer organisations in the world. They're funded by donations, grants from the government, sales of postcards and stuff from this little RNLI shop you see in every English town. Here's one of the lifeboats they use. This is actually at Llandudno, where they launch off the beach against the tractors, but they have the same kind of boat as Justinians. These things are awesome. They have huge motors. They are self-righting. This thing can get turned over by a wave, and it will just automatically right itself again. And there are hundreds and hundreds of tales of these little lifeboats going out rescuing people from sinking merchant ships and teenagers who've got their tube 12 miles offshore. And it's just amazing that it's done by what is technically a volunteer organisation. So moving along, more wildflowers. To a beach. You see lots of random pictures of nice scenery. Now it's starting to get pretty rugged and more out of the way, wilder here. One reason you can tell that is that the fields off to the side are not cultivated or known anymore. These are just wild fields. And I was walking along this part and looking over into the sea, and I found these guys looking back at me. bunch of seals. There's a lot of wildlife on this part, so I was looking at them, they were looking at me. There were quite a lot. I think I counted almost 20 at one point. There's a couple of them pulled out on the rock. So lots of wildlife along here. There's another bird that was on the same part of the track. Hopefully it wasn't injured before. I'm quite sure why they let me close enough to photograph it. And, butterfly, it's a peacock butterfly. The coast path and parts of it are kind of a haven for butterflies because nobody's using herbicides or insecticides anywhere near it. Butterflies are endangered in a lot of the UK, but they're doing pretty well on the Welsh coast. And the other wildlife you see often, well, not often, I didn't see any at all because I was there at the wrong time of the year. I think are puffins. And you don't see them a lot of the time because they spend most of their lives at sea. They only come to land to nest. And they don't nest on the mainland because they're ground birds, they're ground nesters. And they're very vulnerable to predators like foxes and cats, nasty basic species cats. But they do, I have no apologies to cat owners. But they do nest on the coastal islands just off the Welsh coast here. And you can get a boat trip to go out and see them. I have actually seen them further up the coast around Anglesey on a day trip up there. And quite amazing. Because it's not just one, you've seen whole lots of them. This is just an interesting feature. It's like a thunder hole where you get a loud voice when the wave comes in. Just another random fortification. So we're talking about mining again. This is a slate quarry. They've taken out a big chunk of the coast there, and there's a lot of slate quarries on here. A small view of it. And we're coming into a place called Port Game. Just outside, there's this place called the Blue Lagoon, which is used to be a slate quarry. It's very deep, very cold. There's a warning on that sign. And when they finished mining the slate, as a quarry, there used to be a rock barrier across the end there. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe they thought it'd be a nice tourist attraction. When they finished mining, they blasted out to the sea and flooded the quarry. There's a little view. There's the old mining buildings here, and up on the top here, you can't see it, there's a tramway which takes the slate to a nearby port, which we're going to look at next. It's just another stone quarry and small buildings, some of the old mining buildings. So this is near to this place called Port Game. This is a sign just outside. This is an artist's impression of what it looked like in its heyday. And this was used for slate, and then they used to use the residue, the debris from the slate and local clay to make bricks. And then when that dried up, they used it for roadstone. It was used to roadstone in the 1930s. And the tramway would come into the top of the hill here, and the process would bring it down here through crushers or kilns or whatever, and then it would get loaded into ships at the bottom. And most of it is still there and recognisable. This is the key itself. It's a deep water harbour. You can get quite a depth of ship in there. This building is still here from the artist's impression. The brickworks are over there, you can see. They call them the brickworks, but they're used for manufacturing splitting slate and making fresh stone as well. So some quite incredible things. And that is right on the path. The path comes down on that building across the front of the harbour and on the other side. And that's the sloop inn, which was also on the original thing that says breakfast 9 to 11. I think I had lunch there. Lots of interesting places to have lunch. I just put that in because somebody's built this cute little house right on the edge of the harbour. Just a building overgrown. And now we're coming up to some of the highest places on the path. This is looking back over where I hiked, and you can see the mist over the sea there. It's fairly early in the morning. And that's looking the other way. This building here is where I'm going to stay for the night. This is a youth hostel, and this is one of the parts of the coast where accommodation is not that easy to get. There are like 12-mile difference distances between the only accommodation there is, so you have to be a little careful planning it. So as we get closer, you can see it. I think that cliff is about 400 feet, and the mountain behind it is 700 feet at the top. And the hospital is over on this side, over on the right. And over here on the left, there's a lighthouse called the Strumble Light. Closer. This is on there looking out over the Strumble Head. I think this was late that evening. Following that, continued on from the youth hostel past the lighthouse. You can see it's on an island connected with a suspension bridge. I tried as close as I could get. So there's a road leading up to the suspension bridge, but then everything else has to be carried from there up into the lighthouse. And the morning I was there, it was raining and cloudy when I first got up. So I went out, and the lighthouse was working. And it was really cool, the light going around all the clouds. I tried desperately to take a photograph of it. None of them turned out. I was really disappointed. So there are actually less lighthouses than you might think on the coast. So just another nice scenery. I took that because there is in fact a waterfall on that cliff in the middle there. You can see it there. And this is a close-up. Yeah. So moving further north, we've got a place called Fishguard, which is another deep water harbour with a man-made breakwater. And this is behind the breakwater, see how calm it is. You can't see it very well from here, but these are buildings here. There's a train, again, train runs into Fishguard, and it's used for shipping across the island. It's the shortest crossing between Fishguard and Ross there. So buildings there. So there's a lot of stuff comes in the train, gets on the ferry, gets onto the train at the other end. That's looking back. So most of these places are fortified against invasion. And there's one of the liners that goes across to that's the cart ferry that goes across between Fishguard and Ross there. Looking back, just there, so we're going through there. We're still getting high up there. This is going across the very highest point, which is 574 feet. That's the view from the top there. Back down again. And, again, an old church that's been in the graveyard's been turned into a park. Through that, and then into an estuary. This is another place where you have to be a little careful with the tides. There's a low water crossing where you can get across the stepping stones at the top, and if it's any higher than that, you have to walk back up to a bridge. This is a place called Newport Harrow. This is the yacht club. So I arrived here at the end of a hard, sweaty day's hiking, and I'm thinking, I could really use a drink. This is the only place around. So I go in there, and it's got the very posh people. I'm thinking, it's really my place. But I went into the bar, barmaid was there, and I said, "Can I get a drink?" And she said, "Yeah, sure, come on in." Fine. Everybody was very friendly, so I was quite surprised. It was quite a tone yacht club, and there was me in there drinking in all my sweaty clothes. To the Welsh flavour as well. So going on from there, we come round into St Donmales, which is basically the end of the Pembrokeshire part. And this is the T3 River. I don't know. I'm assuming the moment here. This is the River Estuary. This is just outside the hotel I stayed at that night. There's a lot of red geese there. It's both tidal marshes. This is the same view at night. More geese. This was the hotel I stayed in. And from there, I just walked down the coast a little bit and across the river into Carmarthen. This is Carmarthen Castle. Path goes across this little footbridge here. And into Carmarthen. And that's the end of the Pembrokeshire part. And when I got to the end of that, I just kept going. So the stretch between Cardigan and Carmarthen.
Oh, okay. An explanation.
I think it's Cardigan, not Carmarthen. That's right, it's Cardiganshire. It's way down through. And I don't have too many photos here. It's just more beautiful scenery, and I'm going to put so many slides in. And a really good point of view. But here's a few of the more interesting places. This is a big hill just off the coast. Again, this tiny little church there. Right, for some reason, they always put it right on the coast. I don't know why. I guess so it could serve several villages. That's the Street beaches. And this is coming up at the end of the Cardigan stretch, coming into Aberystwyth, and you can see trail here across the inside of the hill. But if we take a closer look, see the trail as it is now is here. That's as old, I think this stretch in 2018. But here, we've got, this is the old trail here. And you see that that's been abandoned because there's a landslip developing here. It's another case of where the trail is falling into the sea. You see it's separating from the rest of the hillside there. And there's lots of loose rock down there. And this whole thing amazes me because you've got to have a 60-degree plus slope there. And the idea of going out on this slope and hacking all these bushes, which are heather and gorse, which is nasty stuff with spines, on a 60-degree slope, and then leveling off the trail without falling off is quite amazing. And then you get a landslip a couple of years later and have to come back and do the whole thing again. I just think this was just fantastic to me that they would put the trail there. Crazy trail maintainers. About that, hopefully we'll go away. So this is coming into Aberystwyth. We have somebody in the audience who went to university there. It's Aberystwyth University is the oldest university in Wales, I believe. I have a picture of it here. So basically going through, the path runs along the front there. And you come out the other side of Aberystwyth and you have to go quite a steep hill to get out.
Constitution Hill, it's a big thing when you're a student. You have to go up there after exams.
Yeah. There's a little park and a cafe on the top. Yeah. It's quite a hall up there. And so there's a castle. Mandatory castle. university buildings are here. So remember that we're having to go up. So these I just put in there because I was going on from Aberystwyth, and I just love the light of this. This is looking back. Actually, it's Aberystwyth, you can't see it, just the light was so cool. So you come up out of Aberystwyth and you go up, and then go along the trail here, and then go down again to this bit, and then go up, trail on the other side, up here, about another 150 feet, and then you go down, and you go up the trail, on the other side, up here, and all this up and down 100 feet, 150 feet. Pretty soon you're talking some real elevation. There's another part, you go down, this was so steep that there's stairs in here, so you go down here and then up the other side. So they reckon that the total elevation change on the whole of the Welsh coast path is 70,000 feet, which is like twice the height of Everest. So you may think you're going for just a walk on a flat coastline, but you're not. Although you can pick your coastline part, you can pick your part and have it flat, but this bit, there's a lot of up and downs. So pretty tired by the end of that.
So how many miles did you do hike straight?
I usually did about 12 miles a day, sometimes less if I was messing around in a National Trust place or something like that. Sometimes more. One day I had to do 19 miles because I got the accommodation wrong. I couldn't find accommodation in the middle, so I had to skip it. I did 19 miles. Usually I was doing, say, 12, 14 miles a day.
With scary clothes or backpack?
Yes. The way I did it was I made all the bookings myself. I carried my stuff on my back, set of clothes and everything, just went from one place to the next. If you don't want to do that, there are dozens of companies over there which will make the accommodations for you, make the accommodation bookings for you, which can be useful because it can be a bit of a worry at times. And or they will take your bags from one place to the next. There are lots of these companies. They're not that expensive. So if you just wanted to go for a walk and they covered by it, you could have your bags taken, have your bookings taken care of. Pretty easy.
Did you see other people doing long distances?
Yes, not as many as I would have thought. There are a lot of people who go to a place and walk along the path close to that place. There are fewer people who do the long distances. I was doing maybe 40 to 70 miles per shot, maybe 5 days a week, depending on how things went. I did meet a fair few other people. But there are a lot of people who've done the whole thing. Like 170 miles. I want to do it, whether I'll get there or not. So, moving on from Aberystwyth, this is a place called Borth, which is just on the coast. And those two black things in the middle, there's actually a petrified forest in the middle of the sea there, which is only accessible at very low water. Very low water, you can walk out and see the tree trunks. The really interesting thing about this is it's very flat, and we're coming up to a really big estuary, which is something we haven't seen so far. We've seen small little crossings. So where I am now is I was down here and I've come over to the coast through Aberystwyth. So I believe, and down to Aberystwyth. This is the Tiffy estuary. This is the Gogloth itself. It's a nice little village town. I was there on a Wednesday, and there's a big farmers market there, all sorts of stuff. There's curry bag and all sorts of things. The farmers markets over here, so down here recently, farmers markets over there go back like 300 years. They've been having these markets. I just took a photograph of that because for some reason somebody put a hobbit door inside of there. I don't turn you on. So I crossed the river, going right back up inland, and now coming down on hills on the other side over the 2 feet estuary. I was actually here in October. That's one of the times when I was not here in summer. There was a mixture of rain and clouds, and the light was very variable because the track I was on was back. So I got some really cool pictures of the light on the estuary. This is low tide. We've got all the sand, which is still just a little bit covered with water. There is some dark there. There's a rainbow. It's raining a little bit. Plenty of sheep. That's looking out to sea. A little bit more in that. And when it varied, then it would go white. And you see all the yellow on the sand now instead of the water. This is where I come from, back behind this headland is Aberystwyth. A light. This is a huge estuary, lots of sand flats here. It's several miles wide. And then I came down into a place called Aberdyfi, or Aberdyfi, I don't know how that's pronounced, which I was using as a base for this part. Nice little village. And this is a picture of the estuary later that day after the tide had come back in again. So from Aberdyfi, this section, I took a bus up to a place called Towie and then walked back. This is the front of Towie, and then the front ends, and it goes onto the beach, breakwaters and stone. We walk along the back of the beach, walk on up to the dunes for a while, and then we go down to the beach itself. By this time, the tide was going out. This is one incredible beach. The beach is like 8 miles long and almost half a mile wide in some places when the tide goes out. Looking at this incredible beach, there's 2 people in far distance. And just as I was getting to the end of the beach, I saw these crazy people. They actually are crazy. It says crazy fly on them. They are doing parasailing. So I stopped and watched them for a while.
So this is October, was it cold?
No, it was still temperatures were still in the 60s. So it was just a little more. If you go in June or July, the weather's usually perfect. There's hardly any rain at all. In spite of what people may say about the British weather.
What's the water temperature?
The water temperature will be colder. Yes. Water temperature is probably in the low 50s, I think. But anyway, after I passed the ultra-active parasailers, I come upon the exact opposite, which is very contemplative. 2 fishermen here fishing in the estuary. Look back along the beach, and this is Aberdyfi itself, where I was staying in a nice seaside town. So this finishes the big chunk that I did, but I want to show you a little section that I did with my son in 2019. This is just a small stretch. I think it was like 8 or 9 miles. A little further up the coast, where I ended down here. I intend to keep going, obviously, especially as the bits around Snowdonia are also spectacular.
Only head up.
It was up there somewhere, yes, but I'm not sure where.
Well, goes up twice all the way.
Yeah, because that's the link for us to Anglesey.
Yes, yeah. I believe that's correct, yes. I think Holyhead is somewhere around here. And what you actually do if you want the whole coast path properly is you go over what's called the Kenai Bridge here, and then you walk around the whole of Anglesey Island as well. This is an island. Yeah. And I had a short couple of days trip with my son out here, and we went from Conway, which is here, to Llandudno. And the reason I wanted to include that was for two reasons. One is there was a castle there on the path that was actually open when I went by it. So I had a chance to go and look around, get some nice castle pictures. And also it kind of finishes off with Llandudno, which is where I started. So this is Conway Castle on the estuary. And to it, yeah, quintessential British castle, English castle. No, not English, sorry. Welsh castle. And actually the whole town is fortified. You can see the fortifications there. And as they built it up, they put houses inside the town, inside the wall. And apparently some of those houses used the old castle wall as one of their walls. So you're living in a house that's got like a 12th century wall. And this is inside the castle. That's the top. There would have been wooden roofs over these parts here. And there were some of these wooden sculptures of Welsh heroes, mainly fighting against the English, but sometimes the French. And so my son decided to sit next to him. We were wondering which one was the most wooden. And also in Conway is what they call the smallest house in Great Britain. And they did peek through the curtain when somebody went in. There was a bed in there and a kitchen. I didn't go in myself because it was £5. And also, it's not on the path. It's like a quarter of a mile off the path. And this is where we are ending up and going. We're across the estuary around here, and we're up here, and up and around this head, and Llandudno's on the other side. And the way you get across the estuary of the river is this cute little pedestrian bridge here in the middle. You've got like a trio bridge. You've got the road bridge on the left, the pedestrian bridge in the middle. I think that was built by a famous British architect, but I'm not quite. Maybe Eisenberg would now. And then you've got the rail bridge on the left-hand side. And what I like about it is that they've made the pedestrian bridge look like the castle, even though the castle was built in the 12th century and this was built in the 1800s. But it kind of blends in, which I think is nice. So you cross there, you walk along some streets for a while, and then you walk up onto the hillside. It's looking back from the coast path to where we've been. You can't really see it very clearly, but Conway and the castle is back here on the other side of the river. And nice scenery again. I'll put this in because probably won't be able to see it too well, but here, this is a climber. So people are climbing on this cliff face here. Another bunch of people up at the top. So lots of sports you can do on the Welsh coast path. Paragliding, paraskiing, surfing. And the other interesting thing about this outcrop, which is called the Great Orme, is there are these, I believe they're Kashmir mountain goats. Which army regiment that has one of these goats as their mascot. So they were given a pair by somebody in India, and then they were given a whole other bunch. Somebody let them loose on here, and they have thrived. They're now all over the place. And during the pandemic, they came down into the town of Llandudno, and they were like wandering around the streets of the town. I don't have a picture of that, but cool. And again, very old church. This is dates back from the 6th century, when a guy called St. Tudno had a monastic cell here. There's no remains of that, but a church was built on the site. They've been having services here for hundreds of years, the locals. But church was built on the spot in the 11th and 12th centuries, part of which this is, and it was then upgraded as time went on. Very pretty, it's still used for services today. It's right on the snake, it's got a nice stained glass window. There are many of these churches along the path, and they all have really nice stained glass, and many of them are very old. So if you're into churches and church architecture, it's a good thing to walk along the path. And finally, as you're on your way back down into Llandudno, there's the mining again on the right there. That's this stone and slate quarry. On the left, again, you can't see very well because most of it's underground. There is the dates from the Bronze Age. About 4,000 years ago, they went underground there and mined copper to make bronze. And you can go on a tour of the mine. It's quite fascinating. Again, it's not quite on the pass, but it's probably less than half a mile away. And that brings me to the end. So we go back down off the headland there, back into Llandudno again. That was the end of the presentation. I intend to keep going. I've done other parts of the path. I've done probably about 340 miles altogether. The 1870, so I'm not even halfway there yet. But I would like to try and finish it. So if you're interested in doing any of this yourself, you can pick parts of the path to suit you, difficult or easy. There is a terrific website, Wales Coast Path, which has all sorts of information, mileage tables, accommodation information, guidebooks. It is one of the best websites on the path I've ever seen. And there are lots of companies who will arrange tours for you. They'll book you accommodation with your luggage. I can't speak for any of them because there's a lot of them around. And you can access it. I guess if you were flying over there, you could fly to Manchester or London airports and get a train out there. And if you're over there doing something else, like in the Lake District on one of the HF tours, stay there a few days and go to part of the Welsh coast back as well. So I'm done. Any questions? There's a question.
They hired some trail makers.
Yes, a lot of trail makes. Sometimes that bit where the trail was sliding into the sea there.
Who does it?
Mainly it's done by local trail club volunteers, like us. Like we go out and maintain the AT. It's done by local trail club volunteers, which they say amazes me. I told we looked at that place where they were putting this trail across a 60-degree slope with all sorts of nasty vegetation there. I wouldn't like to do that. They do a great job of keeping it.
I'm a little confused too about the three different trails. The actual Wales path goes to Emerald. And the
Wales Coast Path goes from okay, never mind. We should probably didn't want to get that on story right. No, the Pembrokeshire Coast Path is 186 miles from Amroth up to Cardigan. The Wales Coast Path is 870 miles going from Chester or
all of that.
the Wales Coast Path. If you were paying attention at the beginning, I told you. The Wales Coast Path. The Wales Coast Path includes the Pembrokeshire Coast Path, the Cardigan Coast Path, the Anglesey Coast Path, the North Wales Coast Path, and several other paths in the middle, all linked. And it's all contiguous. There's no breaks in it.
Yet it's separate from the whole country path.
Well, which country are you talking
Well,
about?
Wales, that's why you go all the way around instead of maybe that.
By adding that,
No, the Welsh Coast Path goes all the way around the coast.
you go down off the side,
If you can- If you want to, you can go around all of, let's see if I can get this back here.
How far is Emerald from Cardiff? You know?
From Cardiff,
Yeah.
I think it's about 140 miles. maybe less as
But
a
let's say
flight.
if you were in part, if you were in part, you could access the path somewhere nearby.
Yes, the path runs through Cardiff. Although to be honest, the scenery there is not, I've done parts
Well, I
of
was
it there.
in Cardiff, I didn't know that.
But there is a place near Swansea, which is just up the coast called the Mumbles in the Gower Peninsula, which is very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Gower Peninsula is lovely. See if I can get a slideshow here again.
And everything's in Welsh and English, I guess, the sign.
Yes, everything is,
Did you come across a lot of people speaking Welsh or just?
many people speak Welsh, but there are very few people for whom Welsh is their only language. And it's a beautiful language. In London, I stopped and went into this church where there was a male voice choir singing. It was beautiful, beautiful voices. All right, so Greg, this is the Pembrokeshire coast path. Don't touch that. All right, these are some of the other paths, as the Anglesey. And the whole Welsh coast path, which includes the Pembrokeshire coast path, Cardigan coast path, and all the others, is this thing here. And it goes from the English border here, down near Bristol, all the way around. The Pembrokeshire coast path is here, Cardigan is here, continuing up here, London goes up here, and it finishes in the north just outside Chester. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Then there's another path that you're being told
Right,
around
there's-
the entire.
There's
country.
another path
Yeah.
that starts in Chester and goes down here, called
Then obviously
Well,
it's
the-
not. inclusive.
Office Dyke path. And that is 177 miles, and it
was on
links
the
up,
first slide.
bottom sign there. It links up with the Wales coast path, 870 miles. So if you walk around the whole country, and that would be 870, 970, 1,040, about 1,050 miles. I don't intend to do Office Dyke. I like coast paths.
We see.
I was up in Maine doing some coast paths up there.
Adrian,
Thank
thank you very much. Talk about which path is where, when,